Construct Understanding wants us to create a graph. So the first thing they want us to do is take y equals 2 to the power of x and make some points for it. So we're just going to plug x into 2 to the power of and figure it out. 2 to the power of negative 2, that's 1 over 2 squared. 1 over 4 is 0.25, so we can just use the decimal version of this. 2 to the power of negative 1 is 1 over 2, which is 0.5. Anything to the power of 0 is 1, so there's our anchor point that all exponential graphs have in common. 2 to the power of 1 is just 2, 2 to the power of 2 is 4, and we could even increase this to 2 to the power of 3 is 8. Now if we went to graph that, we're going to start at negative 2, and it's going to be 0.25, so very close to there, and then at the half, and then at the 1, and 2, 4, and when there's 3, it would be at 8, so we'd have a nice little line like that, going close to but never actually touching the x-axis because we have an asymptote at y equals 0. So those are all things that we've learned before. There's your typical y equals 2 to the power of x. Now, I know you guys know how to get this stuff in your graphing calculator, but hopefully you can do it by hand just like I just did as well by plugging it in. Now what they want to know is what's the inverse of that graph. So the inverse of this graph would have to be if I switched these points all around. So I would have to graph 0.25 as x and negative 2 as its y value. So 0.25 as x would be here, negative 2 and a half, and 1 and 2. Hold up a second. It's hard to think sideways. So we've got the first 3 there. We've got our anchor point at 1 and 0, and then 2 and 1. Yep, that's 2 and 1. That's where I went wrong. And 4 and 2. So 4 and 2, and 8 and 3. So 8 and 3 would be out here. I'm going to move that point just a little and connect them in a decent kind of swoosh. And so now I've got an inverse function. So this is x equals 2 to the power of y, because we just switched the points. But we can't leave it like that because it's supposed to be y equals. Now here's the tricky part. How on earth do you get that to be over there? That's where we're going with this chapter. So we're going to learn a new skill now. Meanwhile, they're asking us the equations of the asymptotes, the domain and range. So the equation of the asymptote here is just we have an asymptote at y equals 0. Here we have an asymptote at x equals 0. So they just switched because we're still dealing with an inverse function. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be playing with these kinds of graphs in the last half of this chapter. And so the domain and range and the asymptote of this particular graph is going to be our focus. So domain for these guys is just x is in the realm of all real numbers. Range is that y has to be greater than 0 because of that. So now we switched the x and y, we're going to switch the domain and range. So the domain for this function here is going to be x is greater than 0, and the range is that y is now the one that's in the realm of all real numbers. Welcome to logarithms.